Hey, Shalom Akim, Shalom, Shalom. All praises, glory, and honor to Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahushai, Ba'ashem Rakakwadash, double honors to the apostles and the elders, great millstone for teaching us his truth. Salutations to the sincere Akim and Aquathami. Listen, may the blessing of election be upon your house. My name is Brother Raquai. I'm back in here with another quick and Lord's will is always an edifying lesson, and I don't really have a title for this lesson. I was kind of just reading through some of the something I found on this website that talks about the medieval, the so-called medieval times, also known as the Middle Ages, the Dark Ages. During that period of time, where essentially where you had Jake ruling in parts of Europe, right? And the article I was reading essentially kind of goes into, medieval diners, table manners, etiquette, right? So I'll just read a little bit of it, and I want to kind of equate things a little bit spiritually, right? Like the scriptures say, a spiritual man judges all things, right? And Lord's will is always this will be an edifying lesson, right? So it says here, so for medieval diners, the fundamental rules at a table were those of courtesy, cleanliness, moderation, and sharing. It says the ideas that we have of insatiable, gluttonous kings devouring their food and spitting out their bones onto the floor are only seen in films. Indeed, medieval knights aspired to be more elegant and courtly ways. So essentially, they had a sense of etiquette, right? So here it goes into the word of companion. So it says the etymology of the word companion derives from the Latin. So the com means with, and the panis means bread. So essentially, where you get what's it called? So in the French, it's pain, like je mange du pain, like I'm eating some bread, right? It says the old French word for companion. It says one who breaks bread with another, right? And it says guests shared food they were served. So it says the person of lower rank would help the person of higher rank, right? And it says medieval diners would also share their food with the poor through the almoner, a person whose duty was to collect the leftovers and hand them out as alms to the less fortunate. So essentially, they had some sort of conduct amongst themselves, right? So I kind of wanted to get a precept in regards to the sentiment of service and servitude, because I'm kind of equating what they're doing. Like, yes, they're serving food physically, but when you think about it, starting with our apostles and elders on down, they're serving food essentially spiritually. We're serving spiritual food, when we go out and we're teaching on the highways and byways, right? And I'm kind of just using this as an example of kind of how are we amongst ourselves, and B, also to show the lack of etiquette our people even have towards when they see us teaching on the streets, right? Like the scriptures say, wisdom crieth without, she uttereth a voice in the chief places of concourse. So that's normally where you would find wisdom, right? And Ezra, as a matter of fact, let me start off with that, because I'm kind of using what they're doing. So yes, they're speaking about actual food, but when you think about it, we're essentially doing the same thing spiritually. We're serving spiritual food. Scriptures say, with all that get understanding, right? So let me start off with that precept in Ezra to kind of show the sense of etiquette, but also show the sense of, where that sentiment of service is still there. Let me go to Second Ezra. Just bear with me. This is okay. This is Second Ezra chapter 8, verse 4, And it says, so I answered and said, swallow then down, O my soul, understanding, and devour wisdom, right? So essentially, wisdom is also something, you can devour also, right? Like the scripture, like what did the Lord tell Ezekiel? To eat this roll and go speak unto the house of Israel. So to roughly paraphrase, right? So there is a sentiment of service, etiquette, devouring, eating, right? Servitude, the importance of bread, right? Yahushua even said that himself too, like, I am the bread of life, right? So, where was I going to go? Goodness. The servitude, right? So let me just, because I wanted to talk about that, because it mentions here the sentiment of servitude. The person of lower rank would help the person of higher rank, right? So I kind of wanted to touch on that. Just bear with me. Let me find it. Okay, just bear with me. This is it's one of my favorites. Just bear with me. Okay, this is Luke chapter 22, verse 24. And it says, then they began to argue amongst themselves who would be the greatest among them. And Yahushua told them, in this world the kings and great men lord it over the people, yet they are called friends of the people. But among you it will be different. Those who are the greatest among you should take the lowest rank, and the leader should be like a servant. Who is more important, the one who sits at a table or the one who serves? The ones who sit at the table, of course, not here. For I am among the one who serves, right? So Yahushua was kind of laying out, some proper like etiquette, and he even showed that, especially in the book of John, essentially when he was washing the disciples' feet, because he said, like, yo, you call me master, you call me Lord, right? He was giving the disciples like an outline, and that gives us an outline of how to essentially conduct ourselves, right, in that manner of servitude, amongst us, right? And that's what we're also doing as well when we administer and we do these lessons and we go out on the highways and byways. We're serving unto our people, but only a very small few are going to hearken to that message, right? So let me go back. Okay, let me go back to my article here. And it says, medieval diners would also share food with the poor, right? I know people are poor if you really think about it, because they're poor essentially in spirit. They invest in the wrong things. And what we're trying to do through the spirit and power of Yahweh Bashim Yoshai is to, stir up their mind, essentially, right? And to actually give them, essentially bring them on game, right? Because the scripture is saying, wisdom and knowledge shall be the stability of thy times, right? So it says, the medieval diners would also share food with the poor, though through the almoner. And an almoner, essentially, it says a person whose duty it was to collect leftovers and hand them out as alms for the less fortunate. It says cutlery too was shared by guests, especially the drinking cup. It says, as both hosts and guests valued cleanliness and hygiene, diners were instructed to make sure their seats were clean before sitting down, and more importantly, keep their hands clean before, during, and after a meal. Most of the food was still handled with hands. Forks were used in the kitchen, but yet had not made their way onto European dining tables. Clean hands were imperative. I'm not really sure how true that is, but the message really to convey in the lesson, really to take away, is there was a sense of etiquette, with, when they were eating, essentially, right? And then sometimes, now, if you were to equate that, spiritually, Jake essentially lacks a lot of that etiquette, essentially, when they come up and they start to, I guess you can say, dine, with, the men of the Lord, the apostles and the prophets, because there's a lack of respect for what there's actually being told to them. For them, it's kind of more about, they focus on who's serving the food rather than the actual food itself, the actual message itself. They're scoffing at the messenger without actually taking in the message, without actually taking in what is being told to me here, right? Paul says, I may be rude in speech, but not in knowledge, right? So let me get a couple precepts on that. Okay, this is Ecclesiastes 5 verse 1, and it says, keep thy foot when thou goest unto the house of the Most High, and be more ready to hear than to give the sacrifice of fools, for they consider not that they do evil. It says, verse 2, be not rash with thy mouth, nor let not thine heart be hasty to utter anything before the Most High Yahweh, for the Most High Yahweh is in heaven and upon the earth. Therefore, let thy words be few. Right? So essentially, the point I'm trying to convey here is that essentially there is a lack of etiquette that Jake has, especially when they come to sit at the king's table, right? We're servants administering onto the table, but Jake essentially lacks the etiquette. So what they would do, they would scoff, they would murmur, talk shit, ridicule, the way we look, ridicule, maybe, we might have like a speech impediment, some of us are probably balding, they look at the physical things about us, but the Lord that's also the way the Lord chooses. The Lord is dealing with the lowly. He chooses the lowly, the base things of the world, right? But the point is the lack of etiquette that our people have when we're serving that spiritual food, and week in and week out, basically, right? Let me go back here. Let's see. Let's go to the Apocrypha. This is Sirach chapter 11. I'll start at verse 7, and it says, blame not before thou hast examined the truth. Understand first, and then rebuke. Answer not before thou hast heard the cause. Neither interrupt men in the midst of their talk, right? So it shows you, just, little etiquette and manners, and the reading actually goes into this too, because Jake lacks a lot of these things. They come out of the world, and they're essentially, they don't show a certain level of respect. There is no looking back for the work, toil, and labor, starting foremost with our apostles and elders have done to give, and that this understanding is for our people, right? It's not like it's for the whole world, it's for our people, right? But our people, essentially, they take an opportunity to keyboard their salvation, throw away their salvation, with a click of a keyboard, basically, right? Or with a middle finger, or to scoff, right? They lack that proper etiquette, when it's something, constructive, and that's going to actually benefit them. It's not for their detriment, it's for their benefit, right? It says here, so I'm just going to go back to the reading, and it says, okay, I'll just read this little part here. That's pretty much it, the point. And it says, knives were used at the table to handle food alone. All other activities, such as picking teeth and cleaning nails, were not tolerated. To ensure diners, did not steal the host's cutlery, those made of the most precious metals such as silver and gold. The household would count their flatware before dinner guests were allowed to leave. With oral hygiene at its worst, thus bad breath a problem, blowing on food was frowned upon, and was belching even close to one's neighbor, right? So just kind of discussing even some of those tendencies that Jake would have, especially when they see us on the highways and byways, right? And even some, for amongst ourselves, like even for myself, sometimes I have an issue, like that's something I have to work on myself, is to not interrupt, when, elders are speaking and all that kind of stuff, right? Let me go to Sirach 32. Okay, this is Sirach 32, verse 9, and it says, if thou be among great men, make not thyself equal with them, and when ancient men are in place, use not many words, right? So, there's a little bit of more of a sense of respect, when we're dining at the king's table, right? Because not going to show ourselves to, be some kind of know-it-all all the time, especially when we're around, elders and apostles and so on and so forth, right? There's a sense of orderliness, let everything be done decently, right? There's a sense of, having respect unto, the elders and the apostles and so on and so forth, right? But Jake doesn't understand that. They kind of just see it as, regular men on, standing on the highways and byways, basically, right? And they don't understand why they're talking so loud, right? Jake is very very natural, and the scriptures say a natural man cannot receive the things. As a matter of fact, let me get that. I want to mess it up. No, that's 1 Corinthians. Okay, I'll read it in the NLT actually. It says 1 Corinthians 2, verse 14. Actually, I'll start at verse 13, and it says in the NLT, when we tell you these things, we do not use the words that come from human wisdom. Instead, we speak words that are given to us by the Spirit, using the Spirit's words to explain spiritual truths. But people who aren't spiritual cannot receive these truths from the Most High Yahweh's Spirit. It all sounds foolish to them and can't understand it, for only those who are spiritual can understand what the Spirit means, right? And it says, though who are spiritual can evaluate spiritual things, but they themselves are not evaluated by others, right? Because not everybody is being spiritual, right? Jake is not being spiritual because they've been in Babylon for too goddamn long, right? And especially, this is what happens when you're being ruled over by a natural king. A natural king. Excuse me one second. I just got a quick phone call. Yeah, so as I was saying, this is what happens when you're being ruled over by a natural man, Esau, because he's not somebody who's not spiritual, and Jake takes on that vibration, of, the person or the people who are ruling over them. So they take on Esau's mentality and his behavior, right, rather than actually being spiritual, right? So, that's pretty much the point. I kind of just wanted to hit that. As a matter of fact, let me just get this last precept here in regards to essentially the etiquette here. Okay, this is John chapter 6, verse 41, and it says, because Jake likes to talk a lot of shit, right? So this is John chapter 6, verse 41, and it says, then the people began to murmur in disagreement because he had said, Yahushua speaking, I am the bread that came down from heaven. And then they said, isn't this Yahushua, the son of Joseph, We know his father and the mother. How can he say, I came down from heaven? And Yahushua replied, and he said, stop complaining about what I said. So essentially, the Jews, a lot of our people were murmuring about him, right? They just saw him as, they're kind of just scoffing at him, basically, seeing him as somebody, oh, is this the carpenter's son? That's kind of like how they saw him. And that's the same sentiment they look at us, right? Going back to the point about being spiritual, right? And not actually receiving that food, right? Because when you go back into the time, when we were in the wilderness, they kind of had a very ungrateful spirit, about about that manna that came down from heaven, right? The Lord was doing all these things for us, serving that actual food when you go into it, right? And then Jake was just being kind of just being showing their ungratefulness for what the Lord was doing to them, right? And then through Yahushua is essentially is that bread, right? And that's kind of like what we serve when we're doing these videos and shows and going to camp and all that kind of stuff. But Jake is showing that same sentiment of ungratefulness, all over again, right? So anyways, I kind of just wanted to bring that up because they were murmuring, right? And Drake is they're just running up a big tally on them, right? So hey, anyways, I guess I'll just leave it there. But Lord's will is always, this was edifying. Just like to give all praises, glory, and honor to Yahweh Bashim Yahushai. Until next time, I say Shalom.